Well, Shabbat Shalom, everybody.
Shabbat Shalom.
We have a double portion this week. The end of Exodus, or as I would kind of like to view it, the end of Intro to Leviticus. I can't help it. I have to say weird things like that because it's funny. Because I know you guys think I'm weird anyway, so we'll just keep going.
Well, you got that right.
But you keep showing up, so I guess it's okay.
He likes weird.
Yeah, we like weird.
But Lori was telling me, I wasn't in most of Torah study last week. I was in at the very beginning and the very end, but was telling me that there's a lot that you didn't get to. But I don't know that we have time to do all of that too, which is hard. Especially since there's like the 13 attributes, which actually this week I was thinking, I was like, man, I really want to talk about the 13 attributes, but I was like, but it's in last week's portion, so I should move on.
You didn't do.
So then I didn't study it.
Okay.
And now I'm
Regretting your life choices.
a little bit.
Regretting your
I'm
life
like, maybe I would have done this differently if I would have thought about all that. I should always remember to ask what we get through when Miguel teaches, because I'm not usually in here when he teaches, because I'm setting up for Table of the Lord. Because it always happens that those are the same week. Which, anyway, moving on. So we have the last two portions of Exodus, and my thought is there are a few specific things I want to cover in these portions, but I also thought that maybe we would do a little bit of, it kind of also lends itself to a little bit of like recap of Genesis, Exodus. So maybe we can go back and touch on a couple things from last week's portion. We'll see how it goes. We'll see where we end up today. We have so many options. So what's interesting about this, I'm sure you notice as reading through these portions, we're starting in Exodus 35. That there's a lot. There are many sections in these last chapters that are very much repetition of the instructions that we've had before about the tabernacle. But something that I went back through. I haven't picked up this one in a while, but I was going back through Robert Alter's commentary on the Torah. He's a Jewish scholar who does not believe in Yeshua as the Messiah, but he does a lot of study basically based off of language and things like that. So it's really interesting. Because he'll bring up a lot of times like this is the same, structure or the same verb or the same wording as here in the Hebrew and things like that sometimes doesn't show up in the English with the way things are translated. So that's always kind of fun to make some of those connections. But as I'm reading through, and it's like he's like, and this is basically a repetition of this section is a repetition of this section, except for sometimes some of the verb tenses are changed and whatever. And so he like doesn't even re-comment on it, which is really funny. So it's a lot of repetition, but something that stood out to me about all of that. So a lot of this would go back to like Exodus 25, 26, kind of through like maybe 30. And then you have this little molten calf situation and golden calf situation, and then it kind of goes back again, which is really interesting. We can talk about some of that at some point maybe. But I think what stands out to me, and I'll go through and pull out a couple of these passages, is that whereas the first kind of giving of the instruction, I could say, or stating of the instructions for the tabernacle kind of is very much from the perspective of this is what God showed to Moses at Sinai. So it's kind of this record of like this is what Moses saw, and it gives a lot of specification and things like that. So it's very detailed, but it kind of has this perspective of like this is Moses writing down what he kind of saw of the heavenly original from Mount Sinai. Whereas this time when we go through, it's really from the perspective of the actual building of it. So 35 starts out with the offerings, right, which we had, that was mentioned before. It also has this reiteration of the importance of Shabbat. It talks about it talks about basically everybody bringing all of the things that need to go into it, and it uses the TLV says wise hearted. I don't remember what other translations say about the people who are coming to bring everything. And then in verse 22 of chapter 35, it says, so they came, both men and women, everyone whose heart compelled him, brought nose rings, earrings, signet rings, bracelets, and all kinds of gold jewelry, and it goes on to talk about all the offerings that they bring. But it's interesting that it specifically talks about men and women. Hebrew is one of those languages that when it's a collective, the masculine is usually used. But here, the language is specific to bringing this in, and so, which is a unique thing, especially for an ancient text. Robert Alter's perspective was also a little bit like the women maybe actually came first, and then also the men came. And I'm like, well, I don't know that we can really tell that fully, but from this, but it's interesting to say. But the point is that everyone really is bringing their offerings and bringing all these things that are going to be required to construct the tabernacle itself. So we have this kind of participation of everyone into this. And then the end of chapter, this is like one of my favorite passages actually. The end of chapter 35, we'll start in verse 30. It says, then Moses said to Bnei Israel, see, Adonai has called by name Bezalel, son of Uri, son of Hur, of the tribe of Judah. He has filled him with the Ruach of God, the Spirit of God, with wisdom, understanding, and knowledge in all manner of craftsmanship, to make ingenious designs, to work in gold, silver, and bronze, as well as cutting gemstones for setting, wood carving, to make all kinds of skillful craftsmanship. He has also placed in his heart the ability to teach. Both he and Aholiab, son of Ahisamach, I probably said that wrong, of the tribe of Dan, he has filled them with the wisdom of heart to forge all the works of an engraver, an artisan, and an embroiderer in blue, purple, scarlet, and in fine linen, as well as weaving. They can perform every craft and ingenious designs. So, I love this section. So, one, it's significant that it's talking about these two men who are kind of in charge of, I would say, the construction of all of these elements, and doing the actual, crafting of everything that's happening there, along with the team. It's understood that, it's not just the two of them doing everything. They would have people helping them, which it talks about later. But it talks about that they're filled with the Spirit of God. So we don't have that language a whole lot in the Torah or in the Tanakh. So it's significant when we do have it. But it is, so I think it's interesting. It's like, so they're filled with the Spirit of God. What does that mean? It means they're given wisdom, understanding, and knowledge in all of this craftsmanship and design and all of these things. So it's this holy inspiration. And this is probably what I like it so much, is that then it talks about their ability to teach. So it's not just that they're making all of these things. It's that there's teaching going along with it. And it doesn't go into specifics of what that is, which I'm like, what are they teaching about? I want to know. But they're filled with the Spirit of God, and as they're crafting, so that it seems like they're being given some kind of knowledge and insight into the significance probably of what they're doing as they're creating. So it's pointing to both this creativity and this wisdom, and this knowledge and this ability to teach, which I feel like sometimes we tend to separate. It's like you're either a creative or a teacher, and I don't know, maybe that's a false construct. But it's like actually these go together in this situation. It's the creators are the teachers. So I think that's really interesting, and I think that it's really cool. And also, this is something else that Robert Alter points out, is that he makes a point that like other ancient cultures, like such as the Canaanites, which would have been contemporary to these at the time of this, and then even later with Greek cultures, they're in their plethora of gods, they had a craftsman god. So they had there was a small g god that is the craftsman that would be doing some of this creating. Whereas here, the Lord is inspiring human beings with skill and wisdom. He's partnering with humanity to do it. So, which I think is significant, and I think is worth kind of pondering and thinking about what that informs us about kind of the nature of God and His character and who He is. Because, and we've talked about some of this before, but I think that it's a really significant demonstration of God's desire to partner with humanity. Because, like we've talked about, like other pagan cultures that are worshiping multiple gods are, they're always trying to please the gods or get the gods to do something for them. Whereas God is really trying to partner with humanity. He could have, right? He gave Moses he let Moses kind of see the heavenly original, so to speak. He could have kind of dropped it onto the earth, right? And everything, it probably would have been more perfect even than humans building it. But he chooses to partner with humans and even put his spirit into people to bring it about. So it's this construction of the tabernacle, which is very significant as far as this place where heaven and earth are touching, where God is inhabiting the earth among his people. He chooses to partner with humans to do that. Which I think even goes back, is a connection, and we've talked about several times. And a few weeks ago, Lori did a great job of bringing a lot of the connections back to Eden. But it's like thinking about Eden, and of course that's such a small, we only have a couple of chapters, right, of people in Eden dwelling with God. But it seems like there's a partnership, right? Like God brings all the animals to Adam to name them all. So it's like Adam is very much, there's very much this partnership and between God and man as far as even stewarding creation. And that's kind of the assignment that's really even given to Adam. And so I think that we're seeing an element of that too as we're having this tabernacle established that is going to be this dwelling place for God in the midst of the people again, in a greater way than it has been since the garden at this point. That there's this partnership again, and so that it's like when you're involved in something, right? There's this ownership thing. So I think it's helpful for humanity to be involved, because when you've helped to build something, right, you feel this ownership and this connection to it, which is also why it's significant that everyone brings their offerings to it. So I guess I'll pause there for a second. Any other comments about that, or anything else that kind of brings up as far as how we're kind of seeing these craftsmen be inspired, this partnership between God and man to build the tabernacle, anything along that? Yeah.
Well, just as you were speaking, what occurred to me is like a foretaste of being completely filled with the Spirit of God. You must be born again in order to enter the kingdom of God.
Yeah.
So these are little hints that that's God's desire, and that's what's ultimately coming.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, it's definitely, because I think, the tabernacle itself, right, this was what I was talking about when I taught a couple weeks ago, is that the tabernacle was not just the tabernacle, right? It's these principles that carry on, and we can learn about how to kind of engage with the Lord and things like that through some of these things, even though we don't have a physical tabernacle. But we do have the Spirit of God dwelling in us, right? So we have a fuller expression of this, right, in our everyday lives. Yeah.
You read verse 32, and the TLV said to make ingenious designs, while the ESV says to devise artistic designs. So that just made me, I guess, press more into what you've been saying, and this, as it says, that building this was just not a natural skill.
Yeah.
But it's a special skill. Not everyone has it. It's so creative. I mean, I'm very aware of that when I look at art. A lot of times, I couldn't do that. And then we've talked about cathedrals and buildings like that are just the engineering and the construction. And of course, I'm always amazed how they're able to build these things with the limited equipment they had at the time. and how it now, it still amazes to me how how skyscrapers or whatever, amazing engineering or knowledge is.
Yeah.
So just emphasize these skills that are special.
Yeah. I think it's amazing. It's like, this may sound kind of silly, but I was visiting some friends in Maryland a couple months ago, I guess. And it's one of my best friends and her husband and kids. And so their oldest is 7. And so they all like Legos, which I enjoy Legos too. But so they're showing me these Lego sets, and a lot of them are the sets that they have. But then one of them is like, yeah, he built this. There's this Eiffel Tower Lego that's probably like, the base of it's probably as big as this table, and then it's like probably this tall. And he just saw like a cityscape Lego set that has like several. There's a Paris one that has like the Eiffel Tower and like the arch and like several different like landmark buildings that had been built. And he saw the Eiffel Tower and he goes, I want to build a big one of that. And he just did it. Like out of his brain. And I'm like, my brain doesn't do that. My brain follows the instructions of the Lego set and is like, this is really fun. But he just like saw it and wanted to do it, and like I said, it's not like he built a little one like this. It's like he built one like it was big. And I was like, what? He just sat down and did it. And I'm like, my brain doesn't do that. So it's like I just think it's really interesting and really cool, like how the Lord gives people different gifts to just see that, to be able to see something and recreate it out of something else or whatever. So I think that that's similar probably to what's happening here. This is obviously for a specific purpose. But these specific people were given these roles and these kind of leadership, and this, they kind of, I feel like maybe had like kind of the grand vision. And then they're helping, everybody else is kind of working under them and working with them and has their own specific skill set. And they're teaching them maybe, and they're teaching some of these other people how to do certain aspects of carving or melting, whatever they're doing. And so they can come together, but it's like somebody has to have the vision, right? Yeah.
So I heard you say that they not only had to follow specific design, but they had some free way to go away, just do some stuff that maybe wasn't specifically instructed, and just to go ahead and God instructed them through the Spirit as opposed to Moses, whatever.
Yeah, so what we know is that even though we have so much detail about the tabernacle in the scripture, if you were to sit down and actually try to build it, you actually are still missing things. Like, right? Like, and also, like, there's certain things that they do, that it says that they do, that we don't know how to do. Like, it talks about the golden menorah being out of one solid piece of gold. And no one knows how to do that. Like in Israel at the Kotel Plaza, they have created a golden menorah, and it's out, and it's behind many inches of bulletproof glass. but it's very large, but they're like, yeah, it's as close to one piece of gold as we could get, because no one can figure out how to do that, right? So I think there was some kind of holy inspiration about some of those things, about how to do some of that. And I think that there are details, and maybe and I don't know, it doesn't say, so this is, again, we're kind of speculating a little bit. But some of the details that aren't specifically given exactly how, like, maybe there was creative license, or maybe the Lord downloaded that specifically to them and we don't have the record of it. I don't know. I think it's possibly a combination, and I think with like what we see consistently with God's heart to partner with humanity, I think it would be reasonable that if these men who are partnering with God to build this, that they would be aligning with his heart, but also have some aspect of their creativity. Yeah, but I think that would still be in line with what God wanted, if that makes sense. Like, I don't think they're deviating from God's plan. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, yeah.
Well,
and I like the fact you keep mentioning heart, because if you go through this chapter, if you were to circle every time that somebody is on their heart,
Mhm.
wise-hearted,
Mhm.
you see it's Lord's heart to dwell with them, and then is it on their heart to dwell with Him? And so one of the things that, like, and I know I didn't come up with this. I wrote this down. Some great author must have written this, but with the, let every wise-hearted man among you come and make everything that Adonai had commanded. And one of the little things I've written down here, it says, wise-hearted men create a space to dwell with God.
Mm.
And that's really what it was. These
Mhm.
wise-hearted, their hearts were in a position to create a space so that they could dwell with God,
Mhm.
which was on God's heart too. So
Yeah.
I love the fact that in this specific chapter, the word heart
Yeah.
is used, giving with their heart. Their heart
Mhm.
does this, wise-hearted, that whole theme is
Mhm.
coming through on building a space for the Lord.
Yeah, which I think is significant as well as we think about the story going forward. So I don't want to fully chase this rabbit, but just to pull a thread a little bit. So so like you're saying, it's very much emphasizing their heart posture as they're bringing their offerings and all of these things, which is significant. And I think we see some similar things when it comes to David's desire to build the temple, even though he ultimately doesn't build it, Solomon does. But there's a similar type of this desire to build this place for God to dwell among the people in a greater way, or in a more permanent way, however you want to look at that. I think that's there. I think it's not so much there when we get to the second temple, because Herod was really only concerned about Herod. So it's different, right? It's a different posture, and he added all kinds of things and made it even bigger and grander because he wanted it to be this impressive thing, which of course it was. And God is merciful and kind, so I'm not saying that God didn't use that and it wasn't still significant. It just becomes, I think, a bit more complicated, and that's a trail to go down another day. But I think the heart posture is different, right? Herod's desire was to impress people by his own ingenuity, which he was also a genius. Like, he was a crazy genius, but he was a genius. And he was an architectural genius and built things that no one else ever could do. And yet his heart, I don't think, was quite in the same place as we see here. And I think that matters. And that's also a period of time, right, where we're seeing a lot of division among the Jewish people, which has continued. So I think it matters a lot. There's a lot of ripple effect, and there's a lot of facets to look at that. So I'm kind of oversimplifying a big thing, but hopefully that kind of makes sense. Yeah, Faith.
Well, I think it brings up the point that all gifts and talents are given from God
Mhm.
for His purposes, but we can see how the enemy will sabotage,
For sure.
steal, and pervert what is intended for God's glory
Mm-hmm.
in any individual.
Yeah, and I think that pride, we are all at risk of giving into pride, right? And so it's something to constantly guard against, especially when it comes to things that the Lord has put on us of keeping, that level of humility and not giving into the pride that the enemy would be like, see, look how great you are, right? It's like, no, only like God is the great one.
He gave himself the title Herod the Great.
Right, exactly. Right. It's crazy. Anyway.
I had a tour guide in Israel, and every time she would say it, would say Herod the Great, and then she'd wait for us to say who was not so great.
Right. That's funny. But true. Anyway. Okay. Let's continue on a little bit. So, kind of just continuing on with some of those, just to reiterate from the biblical text itself as we get into chapter 36. I'll just read the first few verses here. So Bezalel and Aholiab are to work along with every wise-hearted man in whom Adonai has placed insight and understanding to know how to perform all the labor for the service of the sanctuary, according to everything Adonai has commanded. Then Moses called Bezalel and Aholiab and all the wise-hearted men in whose minds Adonai had set wisdom, along with everyone whose heart stirred him up to come and do the work. It talks about them receiving the offering, and then skipping down to verse 4. Then all the skilled men who were doing all the work of the sanctuary came one by one from the work he was doing and said to Moses, "The people are bringing much more than enough for the work of this construction that Adonai has commanded to do." So then Moses tells them to stop, basically, and then they continue on. So it's interesting. I don't know that I had fully noticed, or it particularly stuck out to me this time, is how I'll say it. That it says that all of the men who were doing the work came to Moses one by one and said that they're bringing it. Like, I think in my mind I had summarized that to somebody came, whoever's in charge, maybe Bezalel and Aholiab, come to Moses and tell him that they have, but they all are coming. And I don't quite know what the significance of all that is, but it stuck out to me this time. And so, I imagine that for that big of a response, it must have been pretty overwhelming. There must have been a pretty overwhelming amount of stuff being brought. And then it talks about them being restrained from bringing more, because they had enough to do everything and everything was left over. And again, in this, kind of like Lori was pointing out, even in this section and continuing on, it talks about the wise-hearted. It talks about their hearts several times. So I don't know. I guess something that comes to mind for me when I look at this, especially this one by one, meaning that quite a number of people are coming and saying, we've got enough, these people got to stop, there is this kind of this purity and honesty, like they know the task at hand. Because I think, right, there's the temptation, there could be, just knowing humans are still human, of people are bringing extra, what if they kept it for themselves, right? So in my mind, the way I read this is kind of saying they're not doing that. They're like, we have a job to do, and it's about building the dwelling place of God, and we are not supposed to have our own personal profit from this, which I think is significant, and also, just shows their pure hearts and their humility and their desire to really do what God has asked them to do, nothing more, nothing less, which I think is significant, because also it's showing us that they don't have this idea of like, well, God told us to do this, inspired us to do this, but we have this extra stuff, so let's add to it, right? They're staying in a lane. They're staying in a narrow lane, right?
It just really strikes me too that they don't keep it being like, well, God might ask us to do something else later. There's
right.
like a level of confidence, okay, we trust God with the future too. Mm-hmm. And there's so much integrity in it. Like when I worked at Compassion and the Haiti earthquake happened, like they raised like $18 million immediately, and they told people to stop giving. We're not taking any money for it. You can give it to like most needed or unsponsored kids. Mm-hmm. And I've worked in nonprofits my whole adult life, and like there's so much integrity about it. Like, we have raised more money than we can use in the next 20 years. And we're not gonna like keep taking it just because we could. Right.
Mm-hmm. Which is amazing.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, I do like that you brought that up, because that was the same thing I was thinking. Like, because I do books for nonprofit companies.
Yeah.
When somebody puts a specific need out there, and this is even big. Like, this is specifically for the house of the Lord. So if you have excess or over, you could say, oh yeah, well, we might use it later, but they had a specific task. Mm-hmm. So this was showing a great amount of integrity in all of these people to know that what was being given for a specific reason. And once that's met, then we stop.
Yeah. I think it's really cool to see that. And I think it's something that, like, I think this, like these examples of even, I guess, the modern application, you could say, of like, nonprofits raising money or stuff like that, which, of not taking more than what they know they need or can use for the purpose that they're raising it for, I think is also really important. And it's like, I think it should, hopefully, I think for our own selves, it's like we think about like, well, what has God asked me to do, and then how do you steward that? because it kind of holds in tension this balance of, you know, particularly where finances are involved. Sometimes it's like the Lord asks you to do something, and you're like, I don't have that money, so the Lord has to come through and provide it. But then there's also the you know, the opposite side of that is like, well then, you know, like, how do you have integrity with stewarding that when it does come through, right? It's the having faith that God can do it, and the integrity in when He does. And I think that holding that tension and holding those values and standards is really important. Let's keep going. I'm not going to get into all the details here of all the elements of the tabernacle, unless there's something specific. There's a specific one that people really want to talk about.
You just need to take your upcoming course, and then you'll get
Yes, we will get into all the details. I'm teaching a course on the tabernacle in July and August, so we'll get into all of that. Yeah.
I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, you're fine.
I just, it's implied here, like in the ESV, verse 7, for the material they had was sufficient to do all the work and more. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, it's hard to stop the floodgates,
sure,
and not let anything
right.
get past. And so they did. To me, this implies how important communication is.
Yeah. That
they spoke out. They let people know what was going on, and I can imagine even because I've seen this before. You know, where if they receive more than what was asked, then they'll say, let us know if you want it back. Mm-hmm. If you don't want it back, then we'll give it to something else.
Right, yeah, reallocate
what something else is. So it's just this implication that it's how important, not only in this kind of situation, but in life, mm-hmm. to communicate, to not be silent, but to make sure everybody is in the same boat.
Yeah, no, that's really good. That's good. Okay, so I guess a comment that I'll make, and I mentioned this a little bit earlier again, is that as it goes through, which I think maybe another aspect, maybe even in light of this conversation that we're talking about, that they brought so much more than was necessarily needed, is that the instruction and the details given, the dimensions, all the things in the next couple of chapters do correspond to the previous instruction. So all that to say is just because they had extra, like they didn't make it bigger or something, right? Which they could have. Mm-hmm. You know, if they have extra stuff, it's like, well, let's just scale everything. Let's just make it bigger. But they didn't do that. So I think there's just even by the how much, which I think this is something that people question a lot. They're like, why does it say it twice? Why is it giving all this instruction twice? And like I mentioned earlier, I think it is because it's so important. I think it is to show us that they are building it how it was instructed. They're not, even though because creative people are involved, there may have been creativity in how they went about it, but it still was constructed how God said, even though they had extra stuff. And it's also, I think, just this demonstration of like God gives the image or the download or whatever to Moses, and then the people do actually carry it out how he said. So I think it's just really reiterating a lot of that. And like I said, it's fascinating to get into all of the specific pieces, and that is something that takes a long time. So we'll wait until the course for that. I mentioned a few of them in the teaching I did, the main teaching I did a couple weeks ago. But there's even more of that. And like I said, like what I love about the tabernacle, and I also like to think about it as I'm reading through and think about like where do I see some of these principles showing up in the rest of the story, especially with Yeshua or in the age to come. And I also do think I always, like I said, I basically never recommend that people Google stuff because things get weird real fast. But looking at images, and like you can just do an image search. You don't necessarily have to read everybody's commentary about everything, but there's enough detail that we can get a good a reasonable visual of what some of this looked like. And I do think that that's helpful because this is a construct that is not normal to us these days, that I feel like it is helpful to have some kind of visual of the tabernacle as we're reading through kind of some of the rest of this. Yeah.
And I can recommend DuckDuckGo rather than Google for a search.
Yeah. Yes.
Slightly less lefty.
Yeah. But yeah, and there's also lots of, if you prefer like a hard copy, there's also lots of Bible atlases and books that have diagrams and different things. I have one. I brought one when I taught as an example. So there's lots of those as well. Yeah.
I remember when we saw the tabernacle in Israel, and Tom kept saying, this isn't necessarily, but it gives you a picture of it.
Right.
And the degree of how big it was.
Yeah, and like I said, because like I mentioned earlier, like we have a lot of detail, and yet we don't have enough detail somehow. So everything is kind of an interpretation, because obviously no one took a picture of it back, a few thousand years ago. But I still think so. Yeah, I think there is an element of don't look at when you're looking at artist representations, don't look at it to nitpick it. Look at it for the bigger picture, and to help you get just a general framework of like, what does this look like? What is it like when people are coming in and out? How do people enter? Where is everything sitting? What might it be like to know there's this Holy of Holies back there and you can't enter it, but you're seeing this pillar of cloud and fire above it? Like, what might that be like if that's in the middle of your camp? Even if you're living on the outskirts, but this is in the middle and you can see this pillar, like just things like that, I think are helpful. So yeah, there are definitely some that are better than others, and there are some that are clearly like you went in a weird direction with how you represented this. But my point is, hopefully this makes sense, is just the getting a general framework for it and seeing, so you can see some of it, I think is helpful. And even going through Leviticus, because basically all of Leviticus is happening in and around the tabernacle. So kind of having a visual, something to picture, like as you're reading through all these instructions and all these offerings and all of these whatever, to be able to start to like imagine some of the daily and yearly and whatever monthly rhythms that might go along with some of it in a particular place, I think sometimes is helpful. It makes it a little bit more real rather than just all this theoretical stuff. So that's the pitch I always have to make about that. So moving on, so I'm going to kind of skip ahead quite a bit, like I said, unless somebody wants to go back and talk about anything in particular. So we're going to kind of skip back to like 39 and 40. Let's see. So yeah, so 39 kind of gets into the garments that are made for Aaron and his sons, again with a lot of specificity about the stones and how everything is woven and everything. And then at the end of chapter 39, basically it's again giving a shorter summary of the reiteration that everything has been done as it was commanded, and it says that they brought the tabernacle to Moses, along with all the things that go in it and around it. In verse 42, according to everything that Adonai had commanded Moses, Bnei Israel had done the work just so. When Moses saw the entire work and that they had done it just as Adonai had commanded, Moses blessed them. So again, this is showing this, like, because I think another option, right, would have been Moses saw the plan, so Moses did it. But that's not what happened, right? Based on how this is worded, I mean, I'm not sure I believe that he's completely separate from everything that's happening. I think he was probably around. But it does not seem like he's doing the bulk of the work, or maybe even much of the work of crafting at all. But everything was still done just as it was meant to. So again, it's going back to this heart and the Spirit of God filling the people who are doing the work, that Moses is kind of the one who signs off and is like, yes, this looks like what I saw when I was on the mountain, which is pretty amazing. And, and so it's like, but they did it together. They did it as a community, and I just really love that. Yeah.
Yeah, and then Moses thanked them. He had a heart of thanksgiving. I'm sure he thanked Hashem, but he just didn't say, well, you all did, what you're supposed to, so what's the big deal? He had a heart of thankfulness for them, I guess is what I want to emphasize, that a lot of times we think when you bless somebody, it's kind of like giving them so they can do something, in the future, but it's actually after the fact. And, the whole concept that within Judaism that you go throughout your day, you're continually giving thanks. You're, blessed are you, O Lord our God, King of the universe, who's done these amazing things. And whole concept about like 100 times a day is thrown out there as a goal of not just to say I did 100 Thanksgivings, but and the Apostle Paul said, continually giving thanks. But it's cultivating. I think Moses gave this example, cultivating this heart of gratitude. He could have nitpicked, and maybe some things weren't done exactly how he thought they should be done, but I don't know. Yeah, maybe God gave them the ability to do everything perfectly. I don't know.
Yeah.
But God doesn't act. He says be perfect, but I don't think that means exactly that you have to. Nobody's perfect. And
right.
Prophets weren't perfect, and they were men of God.
And I think we used to. It hasn't been said as much around here, but there used to be a saying that we said a lot around Kingdom Living that perfection is the goal, but it's a condemnation-free zone. So it's like we're meaning that because we're all supposed to be on a path that is leading us to become more like Yeshua, who was perfect, is perfect, was and is and will be perfect. You know what I mean?
Can you say that again? No, I'm not messing with you. What was it? What's the saying again?
The saying is, the goal is perfection, but it's a condemnation-free zone.
Okay.
So if we're to become like Yeshua, who lived as a man perfectly and is perfect as the Son of God, that's what I mean by all the things. Then we should be on a trajectory that is toward perfection, and yet we're human and we live in a broken world. So you're right. None of us will live a perfect life. No matter how hard we try, how much revelation we have from God, how disciplined we are, we will not live a perfect life. In that sense, it's a condemnation-free zone. Like, he's not condemning us for our failures, nor are we meant to condemn one another. And yet we're not meant to be content with where we are. We're meant to still be moving toward becoming more like Yeshua, which means loving other people well, representing the Lord well, being kind, being generous, all these things, caring for the orphan and the widow, all the things, right? And yet we will falter, we will sin, we will, even though he's atoned for it, we will fall short. We have fallen, we will fall, all these things. So in that sense, we are meant to feel the weight of sin, and we are meant to repent when we do fail. And conviction is clean, condemnation is not. So we're meant to feel conviction when we fall short and to recognize that, but we're not meant to be condemned and shamed and being like, well, you messed up, you are no longer, right? You are no longer considered a follower of Yeshua. Your sin is no longer a temple, all these things. So that's what I mean. So hopefully that kind of makes sense of this. Like, we are to be looking toward Yeshua and desiring to be more and more like him through the power of the Holy Spirit. And yet, when we do fail, we don't fall under condemnation and shame. We fall under conviction and repentance. Does that make sense? Stan's thinking about it.
I'm kind of slow.
You're fine. I'm just waiting for the thing I missed that you're gonna find. But what's my point? Where was I going with that? Anyway.
I might add that, like, when you're saying that, so you have striving for perfection, and then condemnation free keeps you from being all about yourself being perfect, and then it becomes more about him.
Right, and it brings,
it helps balance that.
Yeah, so it brings up, it should hopefully increase that element of humility and integrity that we've talked about as far as this tabernacle reality goes as well. So basically we all really need the Lord. Right? We always need more of the Lord, and the great thing is that he's always willing to give us more of him when we want it. So yeah.
The very last line of chapter 39, and Moses blessed them, which is what we're talking about. My parallel back to that is when you look in Genesis 1, because they are creating a mobile garden, a mobile Sinai. They're creating this mobile place. And it constantly shows that God created and then he blessed it. So here they've brought everything that they've created and then Moses blessed it. So I see this parallel of with recreating the trees and all of that, there is this, at the end, every time the Lord did this, he blessed these things, and now we've got Moses, who was like God unto the people. He was the representative. He now is blessing what they've created, this place again. So I kept pulling that string back and forth from Genesis 1, we've created all this, and now that we've completed it, it's being blessed.
That's good. There's definitely a lot of that. And actually, since you brought that up, we'll go to another one of those direct correlations to Genesis, if that's okay.
I know where you're going.
So Exodus 40, which is also just a great I love the whole chapter. It's so good. But specifically, if we look at verse 33, so this is after, so basically it's gone through again, and it's summarizing, and they set it up basically how it was instructed originally. So they're putting everything in the right places, and the order is being created, which is beautiful. So in verse 33, it says, he set up the courtyard around the tabernacle and the altar, and set up the screen at the gate of the courtyard. So Moses finished the work. So, Robert Alter translates this as that Moses completed the task. And he brings up that if we go back to Genesis 2,
verse 1.
Yes.
I love this.
I know, it's so good. So if we go back to Genesis 2, I'm actually going to read 1 through 3. Lori's like, you're right.
Yes, I'm so excited.
So the heavens and the earth were completed along with their entire array. God completed on the seventh day his work that he made, and he ceased on the seventh day from all his work that he made. Then God blessed the seventh day and sanctified it, for on it he ceased from all his work that God created for the purpose of preparing. So like I said, so the verse in Exodus, Robert Alter translated as Moses completed the task. And in his translation of Genesis 2, which I don't have I didn't put down the whole thing, but as an example, it says that God completed on the seventh day the task he had done, and he ceased on the seventh day from all the tasks he had done. So and he brings out in his notes that in the Hebrew, it's the same verb and noun in Genesis 2 as it is in Exodus 40 for this completing the task. So again, it's pointing back to this completion of creation of this new Eden, this new dwelling place, because that's ultimately what it's talking about in Genesis 2, is that, this dwelling place has been completed, which is why there's the rest there. And so at this point with the tabernacle completion, we see the same thing. So the verbiage is the same. Yeah.
Would there also be a thread to Yeshua saying it is finished, completing the work of redemption?
Probably. And of course, that always takes a little bit, because it's like, because that would have been, because we're not it's not written in Hebrew anymore, so it's hard to,
Right.
so you can draw the parallel. So probably I would have to go back and do some looking to see if it correlates to the exact same, but I think it's reasonable to say that it's connected, that it's the same, that it's the same idea. I just don't want to give you a definitive answer since I haven't looked at the languages. Somebody's gonna prove me wrong, but anyway, so we're coming to the end of Exodus with this language that is paralleling us to the creation account, which is amazing, and also we're seeing some things kind of completed within Exodus itself. Let's see here. So I'm going to read the last few verses of chapter 40 because I love them so much. So I'm just going to read the end, and then we're going to talk about a couple more things that are kind of circles being completed a little bit. So in verse 34, then the cloud covered the tent of meeting, and the glory of Adonai filled the tabernacle. Moses was unable to enter into the tent of meeting because the cloud resided there, and the glory of Adonai filled the tabernacle. Now whenever the cloud was taken out from over the tabernacle, Bnei Israel went onward throughout all their journeys. But if the cloud was not taken up, then they did not move out until the day that it was. For the cloud of Adonai was on the tabernacle by day, and a fire was there by night, in the sight of all the house of Israel throughout all their journeys. So, in verse 34, we have this cloud covered the tent of meeting, and the glory fills the tabernacle, which is taking us back to Sinai. So we have, right, the tabernacle is both this reestablished Eden and also this portable Sinai experience. So when the presence of God is filling the tabernacle, we have this language is very similar to like Exodus 24 when the glory of the Lord is meeting with Moses at the top of Mount Sinai. So that's kind of a full circle a little bit. And then also it talks about like I mentioned previously, that this cloud fire, cloud by day, fire by night, is visible to all of Israel, which would have kind of been right over and into, I guess, the Holy of Holies. But it's visible to everyone, and this is also kind of closing a loop with the beginning of this wilderness journey, even though it's continuing. Like this is not where the cloud and fire stops, but it's now has a resting place, which also moves. But anyway, go with me for a second. But we first have the introduction to this pillar of cloud by day and fire by night in Exodus 13, 21 and 22, which is where it starts. The Israelites first have it as their guide, leading them out of Egypt, and it becomes their guide through the wilderness journeys. So it's this manifest presence of God leading the people, and now it is residing in the middle of all of the people. And of course, they don't move until it moves. And then one final little kind of circle closing here, which I think is kind of cool, is that the book of Exodus ends with this statement that it's that this cloud by day and fire by night is in all the sight of the house of Israel throughout all their journeys. So this, and I think Robert Alter says journeyings, and I kind of like that, but either way. So this is another like kind of closure going back to Exodus 13, which is the beginning of the wilderness saga. In Exodus 13:20 says they journeyed from Sukkot. And this is a quote from Robert Alter's commentary about this, which I think is kind of cool, though I have to qualify one of the statements at the end. He says, "We have been left with a sense of harmonious consummation in the completion of the tabernacle, likened by allusion to the completion of the tasks of creation, but with a condition in which the Israelites find themselves remains unstable, uncertain, a destiny of wandering through arduous wasteland toward a promised land that is not yet visible on the horizon. The concluding words of Exodus point forward not to the priestly regulations of the book of Leviticus, which immediately follows, but to the book of Numbers, with its tales of wilderness and wanderings, with its tales of wilderness wanderings, near catastrophic defections, and dangerous tensions between the leader and the led. So, what I want to qualify is that he says that it's not setting up for Leviticus. It is. And so what I'll say about this is that, I mean, I think the point that he's making is that Leviticus is just a different type of book, right? It doesn't really have a timestamp, and it's not so much narrative as it is instruction. So he's making a point that this is setting up for the rest of the narrative aspects of the wilderness journeys that we find in Numbers. However, I would say that by dropping Leviticus in here as this central and high point of the Torah, makes this is appropriate still, because we now have the establishment of the tabernacle. In Numbers, we'll pick back up with that, but we don't really understand the gravity of what's happening in Numbers without understanding the instruction that's given in Leviticus. So, which I don't know that Robert Alter would disagree with. I think he's making a narrative comment more so than a fully structural comment about this. So, because I do think that reading Leviticus and understanding this, I say that like Leviticus is like the ideal of how to live, of how to live so that you can have like in perfect relationship with God and with one another. And then we get to Numbers, we very much see that is hard for them. So, but we feel that contrast having just read Leviticus and seeing what is instructed, what the ideal is, and then seeing the challenges that humanity has with living it out. So hopefully that kind of makes sense. So we leave this, the end of Exodus, still on the journey, but with the presence of God once again dwelling in the midst of the people, which I think is pretty incredible. So we have about 10 minutes left. So I kind of thought I would just kind of open it up to, and I have about 3 more pages of notes that I can make comments about things. But basically just kind of looking back at this Genesis and Exodus narrative that we have so far, anything you want to bring up, connections to Eden, all of that kind of thing. Yeah.
I have a question.
Okay.
I don't know whether my first page or opening page of Leviticus says it's the 3rd book of Moses, commonly called Leviticus.
Uh-huh.
How is Genesis considered a book of Moses?
Because Moses wrote it.
He did.
Yes. I mean, there are people who would argue about that, but
Okay.
But yeah, the 5, so Genesis through Deuteronomy are all 5 considered books of Moses. And historically understood that he's the one who wrote them down. So obviously he was not present through all of the events that happened in
That's why I asked.
in Genesis, but he is the one credited with writing down the record of it.
All right.
Because up until then, theoretically, it was just oral tradition that the stories were passed down. There may have been some kind of writing, but he codified it. He wrote what we have as the book of Genesis. He recorded the stories for all the generations. But this brings up a point of why different people mean different things when they talk about the Torah. Because we call the first 5 books, the 5 books, the books of Moses, the Torah. But then also, sometimes when people talk about the Torah, they'll be like, but it's before the giving of the Torah, which is basically at this point that we're at with going into Leviticus, and generally Leviticus and Deuteronomy are mostly considered the Torah instruction itself. So it's always good to try to figure out what people mean when they're talking about the Torah. Because some people are specifically meaning the instructional parts of it, and some are meaning the set of books. So, side note there.
Can you say anything else about that? Because I heard an Orthodox Jew saying like that their Torah is not our Torah.
Did they specifically say Torah or Tanakh?
No, they said Torah.
Okay. So often, without knowing the full context of that, what I would say is that many times, many of the arguments / comments that I've heard from Orthodox Jews about particularly how Christians or Messianics view the Torah or the Tanakh as a whole is that based on the interpretation, it's not the same. So basically, we are looking at the Torah as it points to Yeshua. And if an Orthodox Jew does not believe that the Messiah has already come, it's a different interpretive lens. And so that will sometimes be the argument for it's not the same and it's because of the interpretive lens. Or different parts of it being emphasized because we do tend to emphasize the parts that we see direct correlations to fulfillment in Yeshua, whereas an Orthodox Jew would not necessarily be emphasizing the messianic fulfillments, but the how do we live in this age based off of rabbinic interpretation.
Okay, thank you.
There could be more nuance to that, but again, without knowing the full context of all of it, it's a little bit hard to make comments. Yeah.
Well, I know that that there's some elements in Judaism that they, when they say Torah, the definition of Torah is instruction. It's not just law or commandments. So all of the books of Moses are instruction, like Stan's point. Genesis it's instruction, so it's Torah. But then they also understand the entire Tanakh is Torah.
Mm-hmm.
They understand all the Mishnah is Torah. So
Right.
it's all instruction. So literally, most Christians don't study the Mishnah as instruction. They just study what they call the New Testament. So obviously, the New Testament is not part of the Torah within Judaism. So there's just that literal aspect of what books are considered part of the Torah when you think of the Torah as beyond the books of Moses as the entire Tanakh and Mishnah and Talmud and Tanya and all that.
Yeah.
Everything is so the emphasis is instruction. But what you said may be even more correct with my impression of what she just said, that they might be actually emphasizing how you interpret it and how you understand it.
Yeah, which would come down to I want to say this correctly. We are not relying on the Mishnah and the Talmud as our interpretive lens, which I don't think that we should be. So I'm not suggesting we change that. We do rely more on the further information that we get from the New Testament, even though I do think it's an important interpretive and I think it's important that we still read the story as it goes and as that we don't overread the New Covenant into the Torah. Anyway, that's a whole other. But we can't read it without things that we directly see. We can't take that out of our brains, which I don't think we're supposed to. And that's where it comes down to lens and things like that. Okay, let me go to Faith and then I'll come over here.
Well, I was going to ask, do the Orthodox hold in the same esteem the oral Torah as the written Torah? So that,
yes.
If they do, that might be another aspect, kind of related.
Depending on which, again, we're kind of we're making some broad generalizations because there are lots of different groups within Judaism and even within Orthodoxy, and so we're making some broad statements that may not apply to all. So let me just say that. But many do study the oral traditions, meaning the Mishnah and the Talmud, more than Torah itself.
Yes.
So they're studying the rabbinic interpretations more so than the text itself, which is
problematic.
yes, it is. That's a good way to say it. It is problematic. It is challenge. It creates some additional challenges, for sure. Yeah.
Okay, so jumping on to a different subject.
Okay.
Sorry.
No. That's fine.
Going back to Exodus 40, would it be, in people's minds, too much of a jump to go from the glory fills the tabernacle, using that word fills, and the Spirit fills the disciples at Pentecost?
No.
looking at the aspect of when I started kind of processing this, we now have a new expression of the Lord dwelling with man when he comes down, he fills that tabernacle. And now knowing that this tabernacle is going to be destroyed in 70 AD, and we know the Lord's doing a new thing because of what Yeshua did, now we have the Spirit filling the temples, the individual temples, and to look at that as a parallel reference of seeing how the progressive from creation to him filling the temple to be with the people, and now his Spirit filling the believers as the tabernacle. I was kind of jumping from that to that to that, using that because the word fills is in there. And I didn't want to make too big of a leap on that, but I kind of see this, how God dwells with man. And where he dwelt with man here and how he dwells with man now by a filling.
No, I don't think that it's too big of a jump. I think it's actually very consistent. I was gonna see if I could find one other thing that I think connected with that, but I don't know if I'll be able to find it fast enough. I'm thinking of when, and there's two different places where it is, and I think I'm not looking at the right one. I'm thinking of when Moses is with Jethro, and he's giving him this counsel to basically have this team of advisors to settle issues. And there's some kind of language in one of the accounts, and I can't remember which one now. I can't remember what the verse is, but it talks about them being filled with the Spirit. Which I think is bringing this kind of consistent idea of like that God's Spirit fills people when there is a need for his like presence and wisdom to be shared in that regard. So thinking about that, so I'm thinking about that, and I'm thinking about how it talks about, specifically how it talks about like Bezalel and Aholiab being filled, but then also the presence of God filling the tabernacle itself, connecting then to what you were just saying about Acts 2 and the outpouring of the Holy Spirit there and being filled with the Spirit. And then as we know that the temple is destroyed and that there's many references to the body of Messiah being referred to as the temple, the living temple or tabernacle or whatever. I do think that there's meant to be this consistent thread of how his presence dwells and why. So, and then like, especially with ultimately the people, the body of Messiah being this temple, I also think it's meant to, I think God's presence is also meant to be recognizable. Like, I don't know if anybody has ever had an experience where it's like you meet a stranger, but you meet them and you're like, they love Jesus. I've had those moments, you know, and it's like there's something that resonates. There's something that bears witness in our own spirit, right? It's that we know this person has the same spirit in them as I have in me. And so I think there's meant to be that too. There's meant to be this recognizable indwelling of the Spirit. And there's I think there's other parallels. I think that we could go on and on about this, and it's actually one of my favorite things to like pull the thread all the way through of like how God's presence dwells and why, and like these connections between these different fillings. But even it talks like that, I mean, when it talks about in Acts 2, the filling of the Holy Spirit, we also have, right, we have these tongues like fire, we have this mighty rushing wind and all these things, which then goes back to this presence, this
Fire by night, cloud by day.
Yeah, it goes back to this fire by night, cloud by day, this Sinai type of experience. And like I said, we have Herod's temple is problematic for many reasons, but also it's that when Herod's temple is completed, when Solomon's temple is completed, we very much have a similar type of God's presence filling the Holy of Holies like we have with the tabernacle. With Herod's temple, we do not. So that has been a point of tension the entire time that it's been standing. So then to have probably not in the temple itself, but on the Temple Mount complex, most likely in Solomon's portico on the southern edge of the Temple Mount complex, have this Sinai type of filling of the Holy Spirit would be significant because they know that that's what's missing from this temple and what's been causing all this division and all this problem. So we could go on. I really like this. You got me going on all of this. Yeah.
Just to add just a little more, these don't happen. This filling of the Holy Spirit is the first day of the first month.
Yeah.
And the one that you guys are talking about is Shavuot, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, we do have dates,
Yeah.
but it is kind of interesting that, I think the New Year's starts next week, I think.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, for the month of Nisan, yeah.
that's exciting for me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is really cool. I was thinking about that a little bit too. I was going to say one final thing. We do need to wrap up, but I don't remember what I was going to say. Anyway, so hopefully everybody's really excited to jump into the book of Leviticus this week.
We're with you.
It's going to be so great. I'm not teaching Torah study next week. Kenny's teaching it, so Kenny gets the first portion of Leviticus. Which will be fun. So, but anyway, I hope that as we continue to do this year by year and we start to build some of these connections, I hope that seeing, I just am always amazed at the like consistency and sovereignty of God and how like he shows his presence and he shows up and we can pull all these threads all the way through from beginning to end, and I think it's amazing. So hopefully some of those things are exciting to all of you as well. And now we get to go to service. So Shabbat Shalom.
Thank you.